Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This time on This Week in Enterprise Tech, hardware keys, safer Docker, and malware flying under the radar.
This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Igloo Software. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like. It connects people with the information they need to do their best work. Try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit or sign up for a live demo to see it in action. And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to more than 100 job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/twit.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Enterprise Technology, the show that brings you everything that's important in the world of enterprise tech. I'm your host, Curtis Franklin. You probably will have noticed that I'm not wearing clerics, and, well, it's not the case that Padre has suddenly gotten much younger and more good-looking. It's just that he's away doing things for his day job, and I'm your host today, but I will not be doing that alone. I'm joined on the show by my co-hosts, Brian Chi, Director of the Advanced Network Lab at the University of Hawaii. Brian, how are things in paradise today?
Oh, we are bracing to see if Tropical Storm Darby decides to visit or heads further out to sea.
Well, I certainly hope that that's one visitor that you don't have to put up with. They tend to bring lousy housewarming gifts when tropical storms drop by. Someone who's not bringing a tropical storm to the party is Lou Maresca, Senior Engineering Manager for Microsoft. Lou, how are things up in the great Pacific Northwest?
Doing great, Curtis. Yeah, it's actually terrible weather today, so it's a good day to spend some time working on Raspberry Pis indoors. So that's what I'm doing today.
It seems like it's almost always a great day to work on Raspberry Pis indoors, but if you don't have that, you've got us. And in just a little while, we're going to be joined by David Lawrence, who is Senior Engineer at Docker, and Jared Chong, Vice President of Solutions Engineering for Yubico. We're going to be talking about Docker and security. That's coming up in just a little while. But before we do that, well, it's time to get to some bits. Let's do that if I can get my thing to move. Here we go. Google Cloud Platform adds machine learning APIs. On Wednesday, Google said 2 of the machine learning APIs introduced in March will have advanced into open beta status. The first of these is the Cloud Natural Language API, which lets developers parse the meaning and structure of text. With initial support for English, Spanish, and Japanese, the API provides a way to help software understand humans. The second API is the Cloud Speech API, which offers a way to turn spoken content into text in over 80 languages. Now, this offers app developers a way to accept commands by voice and to direct those commands at any network-accessible device. Now, since the alpha version of Cloud Speech API was introduced in March, over 5,000 companies have signed up to try it. Google has made it clear that machine learning plays a critical role in the company's future and has tried to amplify excitement about machine learning through the open source release of technology like SyntaxNet, Parsemic Parseface, and TensorFlow, even as competitors like Amazon, Baidu, Facebook, and Microsoft have made similar moves.
The Japanese telecom internet firm SoftBank Group Corp. acquired Sprint in 2013 for more than $21 billion of stake in the company. What also came with that deal, though, is Sprint's debt adding to SoftBank's debt of over $100 billion. Just last week, SoftBank announced it will be spending $32 billion to buy ARM Holdings, which licensed the chips used not just for smartphones, but also an increasing number of internet-connected domestic appliances, and now even supercomputers. Their current debt status is jeopardizing the deal and causing the technology companies to rethink their strategies. Among the companies that license ARM's designs are Apple, Qualcomm, and NVIDIA. Look out in the near future to see how this saga ends.
Hey, did someone order takeout? Well, SpaceX delivers and then sticks the landing. SpaceX has just delivered a payload to the ISS and returned to Earth to stick the landing, which now opens the world to autonomous private space delivery. This delivery heralds a technology that can, for the first time, bring asteroid mining within the reach of mankind, but more importantly, also bring Elon Musk's enterprises closer to terrestrial applications like autonomous buses, trucking, and taxis. This event is especially significant as SpaceX is also asking for permits for more landing pads necessary for testing their new heavy lift booster system.
Google's DeepMind AI cuts data center power bills. Google cut its energy usage for cooling its data centers by up to 40% with the help of its DeepMind artificial intelligence. The company announced the dramatic savings in a blog post this week when it noted that Alphabet's Google began using machine learning 2 years ago to save energy and money at its data centers. Over the past few months, Google added artificial intelligence from its DeepMind research and significantly improved on its results. Google was able to cut up to 40% of its energy usage from cooling its data centers and, overall, improve its power usage effectiveness, or PUE, by 15%. Google noted that its electricity consumption in 2014 was 4,402,836 megawatt hours. That's equivalent to powering 366,903 homes with electricity in the U.S. Now, Google plans to roll out its energy conservation system more broadly and said in the blog post that it will reveal the details of how it was done in an upcoming publication.
Verizon seems to be on a nostalgic roll of acquiring has-been internet companies over the past several years. Verizon closed on acquiring AOL's internet business around this time last year, paying more than $4.4 billion for it. Last September, it announced that it was acquiring Millennium Media for about $238 million, which brings mobile advertising ad tech tools for programmatic advertising and better utilizing advertising data for customers. Millennium Media's original valuation was $2 billion, which is a far cry from a $238 million purchase price they had. This past April, it announced it would be buying virtual reality video specialist Riot for about $10 to $15 million. This week, Verizon has been branded the forerunner in acquiring Yahoo for over $5 billion. What's next, Verizon? CompuServe and MySpace?
Well, the line between fixed rail and buses are blurring. The argument over which is better, buses or fixed rails, is sure to heat up again as Mercedes-Benz launches their Future Bus, which is hoping to provide more efficient public transportation once the technology is perfected. Science fiction writers have portrayed autonomous vehicles in almost every future universe, and I, for one, hope that the industry learns from things like the Tesla crash to incrementally perfect a safe and sane way to get from point A to B. The world is changing, and this Mercedes project matches the Tesla Pot 2 plan, which also includes truck, buses, and package delivery systems.
Facebook is testing high-speed laser internet access. Facebook is developing laser-powered internet connectivity technology that detects optical communication signals traveling through the air. The goal is to create a new type of high-speed internet access. The development indicates there may be a future for license-free communication system. The challenges have been how to precisely point a very small laser beam carrying the data at a tiny light detector that is some distance away, something Facebook researchers demonstrated in their study. The experiment offered data rates of more than 2 gigabits per second, but the company noted that the new approach could theoretically allow free space optical data rates of more than 10 gigabits per second if materials were developed that operate in the infrared part of the spectrum. While the number of people connected to the internet rose 6.7% to 3.2 billion worldwide in 2015, the vast majority of people across the globe are still not connected. Hoping to fix this, Facebook is currently engaged in developing a number of solutions aimed at bringing the web to far-flung corners of the earth. Well, that's it for the blips. We've got more news coming up in the bites and, of course, our guests. But before we get there, let's listen to Padre tell us about today's first sponsor for Twyat.
Thanks, Curtis. I want to take a moment to thank a sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech. But I start with a question, and that question is, are you still using technology from the 80s? Of course you're not, because you're a good IT person. You understand that you need to change your technology, your tools, with the times. So why are you still using an intranet from back then? Folks, we shouldn't be using old technology, not if we want to do our best work. That's exactly what Igloo lets us do. You see, Igloo understands that work is no longer a location. Teams can be together halfway around the world. Igloo is a modern internet designed to do just that. It keeps everyone on the same page. You can share files, have real conversations in real time, and do it all while still being able to use the apps that you currently use, like Box, Google Drive, and Skype. Igloo brings everything together and creates a single destination that lets you focus on your work rather than the tool. Igloo is a cloud platform that helps you share files, collaborate on documents, blog updates, coordinate calendars, and manage projects. Anyone can add content based on their permissions with drag-and-drop widgets and a WYSIWYG editor. Igloo also offers a variety of access, authentication, and identity services to ensure that only authorized users have access in private clouds over SSL and with 256-bit encryption. Now, unlike other solutions, you can customize Igloo to fit your needs and work with your current IT investments. There's no forklift upgrade. You don't have to tear down a bunch of software and hardware in order to make it work. You could use your Office 365, your Salesforce, your SharePoint, your Active Directory, file sharing solutions like Google Drive and Box, and support systems like Zendesk. They all live within your Igloo. Put simply, Igloo is an internet that you'll actually like. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to try Igloo. See if maybe it will modernize your office, get you to the point where you can stop thinking about tools and start thinking about productivity. Try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit. That's igloosoftware.com/twit. Or sign up for a live demo to see it in action. When you sign up through our link, you can get your own Igloo for up to 10 people absolutely free for as long as you want. Just go to igloosoftware.com/twit. Again, that's igloosoftware.com/twit. We thank Igloo Software for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now back to Curtis and the gang.
Very glad to be back and get into our first Enterprise Bite. It seems like malware is back to piggybacking on legitimate software. There's a legitimate tool known as MIadmin, and it's used to provide remote access to a computer so someone can work on it even when they don't have physical access to the server. According to Monday's blog post, members of a criminal enterprise known as Lurk somehow managed to tamper with the MI installer so that it surreptitiously installed a malicious spyware program in addition to the legitimate admin tool people expected. To increase their chances of success, the criminals modified the PHP script running on the MI web server, suggesting that they had control over that website. Now, Kaspersky Lab experts went to the official MIadmin website and tried to download the software. They succeeded, but when they analyzed the software from the website, it showed them that along with the clean, legitimate remote access tool, the Lurk Trojan had also been downloaded. The thinking behind the strategy is clear. The victim is unlikely to notice the malware installation because, due to the nature of remote access software, it's treated as malicious or dangerous by some AV solutions. Knowing that IT service specialists inside businesses don't always pay proper attention to warnings from security solutions, many would treat it as a false positive if it were detected by the AV solutions. Users didn't realize that malware had in fact been downloaded and installed on their machines. Now, this is certainly a sophisticated piece of malware that's been able to hide in plain sight and use a legitimate piece of software's own distribution system. And Kaspersky has determined that the Lurk Trojan has been propagated through AMI.com since early February 2016, continuing a trend that we've seen across the industry where not only does an attack take place and succeed, but the results are left in place for weeks or months before they're noticed. Now, the truly dangerous part is that since this was buried in the downloaded copy of legitimate software, so many security specialists thought it was a false positive. Now, I'm going to bring my co-host Brian Chi in. Brian, how big a problem is the whole false positive issue when it comes to this kind of malware?
A lot of users don't really understand the scanning software, AV software, anti-malware software, and they think it's just a magical black box. Now, the the philosophy has been so many people trust what comes off websites, and have forgotten over the years of, things like people actually making copies of infected DVDs back when DVDs were the way to distribute software. It happens. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of, I got to trust the system, but it's what I downloaded. It's a fresh copy. And in this case, Kaspersky actually downloaded a fresh copy from the admin website. And lo and behold, the malware was already embedded in it. So it wasn't an attack vector from outside. This is a little on the scary side because typically remote access tools are considered a trusted admin tool. Why they're not using Microsoft Remote Desktop, plug. I don't know. There's a lot of things out there that I still have a lot of questions for the Kaspersky people and the admin folks. What happened? Why was it still there? Why was it not detected? Because it's been there since February of 2016. Weren't there some audits? Weren't someone checking it? There had to have been some sort of automation in there as the admin people put fresh, updated copies on there that it's somehow or another inserting the malware again. This is going to be a little confusing, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more details coming out as the Kaspersky folks and the Russian authorities dig deeper. And oh, by the way, this was Russian authorities, which is very cool because maybe the Russians are starting to play in the world market better.
Well, one can but hope. Lou, I want to turn to you because while Brian lives in the security part of the world, you tend to live in the dev side, and this is something that was an attack through the dev side, if you will, certainly through the distribution side. Is malware something that you tend to be aware of or think about during the dev and distribution design process, or is it something that in the breakdown of authority and responsibility tends to be someone else's issue?
We always are running through scenarios. We do threat modeling and security scans and semantic analysis and so on and so forth of the code, just to make sure that there's things that even some of the developers haven't put in there by mistake or even sometimes on purpose. And also we run multiple tests on pretty much every operating system that Microsoft in our case supports, as well as when we ship to iOS and Android as well, we do something very similar. The thing that's really interesting to me about this one is a lot of the operating systems. Now, this is a Windows app, but a lot of the operating systems, like for instance, Mac OS and Windows, they have this concept of verification on digital signatures. So when you build a piece of when you build an app and you basically distribute it, you have to sign it with a special certificate, and that means that when you download the app, the operating system will attempt to verify that certificate when you run it, and if not, it usually gives you an error, like for instance, this installer didn't have a digital cert, or this digital cert is from an unknown publisher, or do you still want to run this, that kind of thing. And so that's why to me it's almost like an education problem, because at this point users might be so used to that from downloading open source software, or maybe even running things from right from the web, that they're used to just kind of clicking past those messages, and that's kind of the bad thing. But the interesting thing here is that this particular package uses an NSIS installer package, and that's not Windows installer. That's actually some open source packager that will create an archive, basically a zip file of the files. And normally you're supposed to sign that with this digital certificate, but in this case it looks like the one on their website wasn't signed. It was packed up with not only the admin software, but also this piece of malware. And then when users downloaded it, it basically auto uncompressed itself. And for me, I didn't see actually. I actually ran this thing in a sandbox. I didn't actually see a warning from any of the operating systems. Even Windows 10 didn't really say anything. It just kind of unzipped it. The weird thing is, I think it's because NSIS actually, the installer actually runs preemptively at an elevated permission. So that's probably why it didn't give you any admin prompt or anything like that. So I think that's where the problem lies. And I think this might be something from an operating system perspective that might need to be patched. So that's my perspective.
You know, it's interesting that you talk about the operating system and basically this halo that the application the users thought they were downloading provided for the malware. Brian, I want to come back to you because that seems to be an attack vector that could be successful in a lot of situations. It's almost the equivalent of an attacking aircraft that flies within the radar signature of some larger aircraft. Is there a good way to protect against this sort of thing where you have a piece of software, a legitimate piece of software that's likely to throw some security exceptions, and you have a second piece of software sliding under that? Are there good ways around that, either from the dev or from the user angle?
Yeah, actually, let's answer this in a couple of ways. First off, shout out to JJ raised to the 4884. Yeah, you know, the issue is a trust methodology. You know, how well is the app trusted? So if it's coming from, say, the Microsoft or Apple App Store, there's supposedly a higher level of trust. You know, we're not going to have this open source installer. So that's one thing. That's something that can be done in short term. In the longer term, the reality is a lot of these installers, you get what you pay for. And if your customers lose their trust in your product, then your investment in the free open source installer was a bad investment. So maybe it's time you buckle down, get a real installer that actually does the signing and maintain your signatures. That, I think, is the longer term. So short term, maybe we shift over to the app stores exclusively until they get their act together. And then maybe later on, you know, we can start trusting non-app store apps once people clean up their act. Maybe some sort of like stamp that they put on saying, you know, something certified or whatever. There needs to be a lot more trust in our dev cycle, you know, as we install apps onto our machines.
So if I get this straight, you're saying that stomping around the shadier back alleys of the internet is probably not a good idea when it comes to security. I think I'm going to have trouble wrapping my head around that. It just seems so counterintuitive. Well, we were talking a bit about signing things during the answer here on this bite, and we've got a lot more on signing here in this episode of Twiet. We'll be talking to our guests, David Lawrence of Docker and Jared Chong of Yubico, about their use of signing with some of the latest technology. But before we get to our guests, let's go back to Padre for word of our second sponsor for this episode of Twiet.
Thanks again, Curtis. Let's go ahead and take a moment to thank a sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech. And it's going to start with another question, and that is, do you want the perfect hire? Well, of course you do. We all do. No matter who you are, the owner of a company in charge of hiring, it's the people that you bring in that will determine the success or the failure of your project, of your company. They bring in the skills, they bring in the experience, and they bring in the energy that will make your small company turn into the next billion, 10 billion, $100 billion behemoth. So if that's the case, why are you still relying on old processes, old technology, old methods to get the best candidates? It just doesn't work. For you to get those candidates, you need to cast as wide a net as possible, which is exactly what happens when you use ZipRecruiter. Now, posting for jobs in one place isn't enough to find those quality candidates, so ZipRecruiter posts to 100+ job sites with a single click. And that means that you can reach the people on popular social media destinations like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, pretty much all the places frequented by the talent that your business needs most desperately. You just post once, and within 24 hours, you can watch your candidates from any city or any industry nationwide roll into ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use interface. You can search by skills, by location, by experience, and more. ZipRecruiter will automatically match potential hires with your precise needs. No more cookie cutters. They give you the people that you need, the culture that you need, the experience and the skills that you're yearning for. They've even created a responsive design that works on desktops, laptops, and mobile devices, complete with a mobile application process, so you won't miss any potential great hires. This means no more juggling emails or calls to your office. This means no more prolonged back and forth. This means that you just screen, rate, and hire the right person fast. ZipRecruiter has been used by over 800,000 businesses, and you can try it now for free. Getting the right people for your company is so important. Do you really want to leave it up to chance? More than 125 million candidates' applications have been delivered. Get your share of the best employees today. Right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free by going to ZipRecruiter.com/Twyit. Access millions of resumes on ZipRecruiter with thousands of new ones added daily. ZipRecruiter is the fastest way to hire great people. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Twyit. That's ZipRecruiter.com/Twyit. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now back to the action with Curtis, Brian, and Lou.
Thanks, Padre. We appreciate you taking care of our sponsors. Now, recently at DockerCon in Barcelona, Yubico announced a hardware signing solution for Docker verification. Now, these tools are meant to make using containers safer without putting extra strain on the developer workflow. I mean, no one wants to slow down the work of developers. This new approach includes support for hardware signing with a Yubico hardware key. Brian, I think you've got one or two of those keys that you can show everyone, don't you? You see, there's a nice small solution. That's a pair of keys, right?
Yeah, actually, it's my primary and my spare.
Very cool. It seems like the sort of thing that doesn't get in your way too much as you're going through your normal workflow. And one of the nice things about this is that by using this hardware key and user namespaces, Docker containers don't have to have root access. And as we all know, anything you can do to limit root access is a good thing from a security perspective. These two features are now available in Docker's experimental release channel. This is such an important thing for developers and the Docker community that we wanted to bring on two people who are well suited to tell us all about it. We've got, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, David Lawrence, who is a senior engineer at Docker, and Jared Chong, Vice President of Solutions Engineering for Yubico. David and Jared, welcome to This Week in Enterprise Tech.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us, Curtis.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
It is our pleasure. Now, I want to get into this real quickly. And David, I'd like to start with you. Can you give us just a quick sketch of what this greater Docker security framework is all about? Why is signing important for people developing within the Docker framework?
So I think what we see in general with security around Docker is people are very interested in runtime security. Everybody's writing code. Everybody wants to deploy applications. Runtime security is kind of the hot thing. A lot of people aren't thinking about infrastructure and distribution security sort of quite as much. And distribution security is really important. You know, you were just talking about malware being distributed through unsigned software. So we have to find a way to actually distribute containers that we know are going to run in highly sensitive environments in a way that is secure, and signing is a well-understood mechanism for doing that. However, the existing signing solutions out there, frankly, aren't sufficient. Software has some unique properties that the signing systems that have been available in the past just weren't designed to handle. In the past, you wouldn't want to be able to repudiate any content you signed. That is, you wouldn't want to be able to come back later and say, I did not produce this. With software, you have an interesting situation where software goes out of date. Vulnerabilities are discovered, they're patched. So you can't simply accept any piece of signed software. You have to actually be able to say, is this the good thing that I want now and it's valid? And there is some piece of information that confirms to me that this really is the version of this software I should be installing. So Docker has spent the last 18 months working on an open source tool called Notary. That's the project that I lead. And we've built a signing framework that enables the producer of a Docker image, just like somebody would produce an iOS application, to sign that piece of content into this notary framework, which is built on top of something called the update framework. And in signing it into that, it comes with a lot of additional metadata that tells you this piece of content really is still valid today when you are trying to run it. You wouldn't want to deploy an old version of, say, Nginx that had Heartbleed in it. That would be absolutely terrible for your organization. And we can provide those guarantees. Docker has consistently added additional security features that are helping people manage these kinds of infrastructure problems. So beyond simply signing the image, Docker has launched a security scanning service. So when you upload an image to a repository on Docker Cloud, your image will get scanned for any known CVEs against the major CVE databases like MITRE, and you'll be alerted if you have an image, for example, with Heartbleed. And in the future, we want to integrate signing into that so that people can start building up signing policies. And you can say, I want to deploy only images that were signed by a developer in my organization and passed the scanner with no problems, and then potentially went through, a round of QA or the security team signed off on it. So now we're dealing with multiple signatures as well, and this is a feature that Notary has been designed to handle. And where YubiKeys fold into this is that key management is hard. We have good crypto algorithms. We can sign something, and given the correct key, we can say, yes, this was signed by the person I expected. But private key management in particular, we have users signing things. They potentially have multiple devices, and they need to be able to carry their key between those devices in a secure manner. And beyond that, when the key is actually sitting on the device itself, we want it to be protected from any kind of malware. And not just malware that might come in and steal the key. We can encrypt the key on disk, and we do. But also malware that might attempt to sign content directly from their computer where they have access to the key. And one of my colleagues has a great comment where he says, your malware can't grow an arm out of your computer. So YubiKeys have a touch feature that you're required to touch the YubiKey when it's necessary to sign. So this gives us these additional layers of security. It gives us defense in depth. So that when you get a piece of content that has been signed within the Notary framework, which is integrated into Docker itself as Docker Content Trust, you have a very high guarantee that it came from the person you expected it to, their keys haven't been compromised, and that it is a current and valid piece of software that isn't outdated. It isn't something that's no longer being maintained. There has been a confirmation that this does not have vulnerabilities, and it's what I, as the publisher, meant for you to install.
Well, I'd like to get into the hardware key, and we're going to do that in a moment when we bring Jared into the conversation. But we have a question from our chat room. JJ to the 4884 wants to know if within this you specify the particular hardware keys, or because it's open source, do you leave the specific nature of the key up to the individual developers? Is it possible for people to develop their own solutions?
So what we've done is actually integrate with a PKCS11 interface, which is an open standard. We worked with the Yubico development team to actually build an integration. In theory, PKCS11 should allow you to support any device that supports that interface. In reality, what we found is every use of PKCS11 is slightly different because there are a number of vendor-specific options that can be included. So in theory, we probably need some work to make it work with any arbitrary key. At the moment, there are some specific options we set, things like turning on touch to sign, that are specific to the YubiKey.
Very good. Well, speaking of YubiKey, I think it's time to bring Jared into the conversation. Jared, this looks like a very convenient, very easy way to add the signing capability. Can you tell me about what YubiKey has done to make that possible within this context?
Sure. So some background on the YubiKey. So we started this project with Docker folks more than a year now, and the functionality we actually released with them was the capabilities to do code signing with a touch, and that's really for us is the first in the industry. But this touch concept has been around since the beginning of the YubiKey, creation. So we had the first generation of YubiKeys, a touch releasing a one-time passcode, which I believe a lot of our users are still using today. And then we evolved that process from the touch being able to do one-time passcode generation, and the touch then could do an open standard FIDO standard, FIDO U2F, which we work with the Google folks. And that touch allowed you to do strong authentication using public key crypto, meaning you had to touch the YubiKey to sign. It was actually a similar kind of concept, but for authentication. And then we worked on the touch concept now for code signing. And so the same process to do a single gesture operation, which is just a touch, can do multiple things. And the way that we look at it is that if you were to own a external hardware authenticator, then it would make sense to use the external authenticator for as many systems as possible and use strong crypto to really protect whatever you're trying to do, whether you're trying to authenticate or whether you're trying to sign code. They should be as simple as just a touch. And so that concept was really amplified when we worked with the Docker folks, being able to leverage this new capability that we released about now close to a year now, where you could literally, you actually would require to touch the device to sign the code. And that's really, from our perspective, adds a significant layer on top of how you would deemed as the ability to protect that signing operation, as opposed to letting some type of software agent do that on your behalf or in the background. In this situation, if you really wanted to sign your code, the developer really had to physically touch the device. And so I think that adds a huge bar to, as David mentioned, to not have malware just do that on your behalf.
Now, I want to be clear with this. When you're talking about touching the device, you're not actually doing sort of two-factor authentication where you're doing any sort of biometrics. This is just a physical touch, or is it into the biometrics area of things?
At this time, the touch is just a capacitive touch. So that your fingers have electrical signals. And so when you do touch that particular device, it actually just enough of that little jump in voltage to allow that operation to happen. So essentially, if you think about it, in order to activate the operation, the crypto operation, you would have to have a physical individual with electrical signal to perform that operation. So it doesn't have biometrics necessarily, but it does require a physical presence of an individual human being.
Okay, so it requires a human being, but not necessarily a specific human being. That's
correct.
Sounds like a very cool way to go with this. Now, I'm curious, you announced this at the conference. What kind of response did you get from people you talked to there?
So I think, first of all, we actually gave out free keys. So I think everybody was very happy to have a free YubiKey. I think the overall concept of security it takes time. I think the audience in general are focused on building Docker containers. And sometimes when you think about in such a conferences, security sometimes is the afterthought. We wanted to bring that front and center. So I think over the last couple months now, we've definitely seen a huge interest in actually enterprise trying to build this in-house, coming to us, both David and I, to build out real solutions for the enterprise. Because I think what we really need is for the enterprise to be able to soak this concept, because it's a new concept in general, both Docker and being able to sign with hardware keys, and then being able to put that into their own perspective, their own context, and scale it. And that's the key thing that is required as an industry, is we've got to put in that additional time to learn about what these new things are doing, but don't forget about the security elements that come with some of the new things that we're building.
Well, this is raising a lot of questions among both our conference, our chat room members, and my co-hosts. Actually, a question from Lou, in my co-host. He's talking about the process that he goes through in order to commit software changes at Microsoft, and it's a rigorous one that does require multiple layers of authentication for the user. Are you assuming that there will be those layers of authentication? And actually, what I'd like to do in order to get all of this explained is let Lou ask the question. He's much better at it than I am. Lou, why don't you take this?
Sure. Thanks, Curtis. So yeah, you're doing fine. So no, I think one thing I asked was, at some software companies, they require multiple layers of authentication, and they, in order to, like, for instance, you send the piece of software or binaries out to a service, and then you have to have smart card access, you have JIT-admin access to that, and then you have to give a password, and then they do scanning of the software to make sure it should be kind of signed. It almost, this solution almost seems too easy, like as if someone could take your key and just go start signing software and then post the software. Is that the case with this type of solution?
So I think I'll take this one. So there is additional authentication, because somehow you have to have a human readable, human referenceable name to use. So there is authentication around who can own what name. And that's the existing authentication in the Docker Hub. You sign up for an account. You can then push images to a namespace underneath your particular account name. The authentication around the sort of software itself, the idea is like anybody can and should be able to sign a piece of content. Within the context of Notary, we have a key hierarchy. And that key hierarchy allows the owner of a given namespace to control who is allowed to contribute content within that namespace. So this allows for teams to have different members with different levels of permissions. So you may have one group of people who can only submit development content, and then maybe you have another team that can take the development content, verify that it really came from the developers, and do their own testing on it, and then they sign it. And you can have any number of layers of these until it finally reaches a gate to get to production, where you can go back and check, did every single person that I require sign this piece of content before you deploy it to production? So each of those steps you're talking about, you would have somebody sign the content once they've completed their step. And the people at the next step can go and verify that all of the previous steps have been completed. And through the key hierarchy, I don't have to go to the individuals in those previous steps and say, give me all your public keys. There is an administrator who manages the entire namespace and says, I am going to give this particular person, via their key, access to some particular set of groups that they need to be part of, so that that person, as a member of that group, can then sign the content, and it can be recognized that their particular function has been completed.
Yeah, and I do want to add one point as well, was that this is the smart card capability of the YubiKey. We have take this capability that we've developed with the smart card capabilities. It's actually following the PIV standard that NIST published. And we've actually morphed this into something that's more, I would say, modern. And this, to me, is a smart card with a touch. So typically, what you would do today, you would have to remove the smart card, put it back in again, type in a PIN, and then continue operation, which is what you've described, Lou. So what we've actually done is that we could define a PIN policy or a touch policy. You can have either both or one or the other or none. So giving this flexibility allows for the system administrator to decide how much level of authentication do you want to challenge that user. So you could have a PIN, you could have a touch, you could have PIN or touch, or you could have none. And so we understand, during development cycles, if you make it really difficult to build software, people will start to copy the keys and go everywhere they want to go, and then you've lost them in terms of security because they're going to find ways around it. So you have to balance that all the time. And so what we've said is that we let individual organizations decide whether they want the PIN as well, or they just the touch as well. So those are policies that you can set up during the configuration itself when you work with Docker, and that gives flexibility. So in our perspective, let's make the smart card more usable for the modern world.
Jared, you're talking about the latest generation. I want to hear a lot more about that, but we also have among our co-hosts someone who's been using YubiKey products for a while, and I know that Brian had some questions he wanted to ask about history leading up into your current products. Brian?
Yeah, actually, I'm dying to try the YubiKey signing of my Docker containers, but I was wondering, can I use the legacy the old $25 keys. I've noticed they've disappeared off your website. So I was wondering, are early adopters going to have to buy some new keys?
Yeah, so yes, you do. So to be completely transparent, you have to buy a new key. And I think the model for us, so Yubico as a business, we sell our keys and we innovate on our keys, and that's the only thing that we make money out of. So we do have to provide new capabilities for our devices. The key that you have is YubiKey 2. That's the second generation key. We actually have a third generation key that can communicate over. Many of you are aware as well, the NFC capability. And then the latest key, which we are working with the Docker folks on, and a number of other solutions on, is the YubiKey 4. So YubiKey 4 is really the latest generation keys, and it has a number of new functionality in there, including the touch feature for Docker signing. And what we've always said is that if you have specific use cases that you didn't want one or the other, we try to make it easy for our users to purchase the keys, and we've been really made a conscious effort, even though we added a lot of functionalities into the same device, to really try to keep the price down.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
It's interesting hearing the use cases here, and I know that I just got a note from my other co-host Lou talking about using this for LastPass. From the YubiKey perspective, do you see a lot of people using single keys for many different applications, and is that the purpose of the hardware key?
That's a very good question. I think that's been our journey. Our journey has been always to use the same device for many different services, and services as in consumer services, but also enterprise services and products. So when we moved from a single transport, single protocol, so the single transport being over USB, to single protocol, which is the OTP device, to where we are today, which we are supporting over, I would say I wouldn't even be able to show you clearly with my fingers, but there's so many things that you can do now with the YubiKey, and that allows you to work with a variety of systems, both from a legacy perspective, but also some of the new things. So very typical usage for YubiKeys today is to log in with Gmail using the FIDO U2F protocol. The same protocol can also be used to log into GitHub, which many of the developers do as well, so that one device can log you into two different services, and actually you can work with Dropbox as well. So the number of these type of services that you can log in to with the YubiKey, and there are other systems that you can log in to with OTP-based protocol, like LastPass, as Lou mentioned. There are a whole bunch of other services as well with OTP-based options. But then really there's a lot of new products right now that are using our smart card PIV capabilities, including the Docker teams integrating that into their core product, allowing for a much higher bar to set to do code signing. So I would say the gamut range from logging into services to logging into computers to signing code, and even some of the other cases, even encrypting email, because we do support the OpenPGP capabilities on this YubiKeys as well.
Very good. Well, I want to bring things back to what was announced in Barcelona, and really whether that's the end of a journey or just the beginning of a security journey for both sides of the equation. David, let me go to you first. Where do you go from here, or does Barcelona mark the ultimate step in security for Docker?
I mean, absolutely not. Even if we were just talking about signing security, Barcelona wouldn't be the end. We've continued to work on the project since then. At Barcelona, we didn't have the ability to do delegations, so you couldn't manage teams under our framework. The specification allowed for it. We hadn't yet implemented that functionality. We now have delegations. You can actually have teams. We're working on adding signing policy so that somebody using Docker's data center solution has the ability to set up these pipelines with a signing policy that prevents unauthorized content, unauthorized Docker images from being deployed into their production ecosystem. I mean, Docker, beyond signing, has a regular cadence of security additions. Just in the last year, we've added default seccomp policies, default capabilities, a default app armor policy. We've added user namespaces. We've added new C groups. Every single release of Docker has new security features. And the goal is that just by running your software in a Docker container, even if you don't explicitly apply any additional runtime security, you will be more secure. And we're already seeing that bear fruit. There's a fantastic page that tracks all of the CVEs that are automatically protected against just by running in a Docker container, even if you didn't apply additional security policies to that container. What we're going to see from the signing is expansion of the use of YubiKey in the product. At the end of the day, I want every single person who is signing content to have their key on a YubiKey for the two reasons that, one, they can now carry that key easily with them. Transport of it doesn't have to go through an unsecured USB flash drive or through an email or something like that. It's in the hardware. It cannot be removed from the hardware because there isn't an interface to remove a private key from a YubiKey. The other thing that I love about hardware is that if your key is lost, you know immediately. If malware gets on your computer and lifts the key off, it may be months, if you even discover it, that the malware got in there. And it may take you even longer or not at all to find out that it lifted off your private key. I mean, as soon as you find out it's there, you should clean up and change all your keys anyway. But unfortunately, the state of the art is a lot of people have keys sitting on their disk on their computer. And this is in the general sense. Notary encrypts all of the keys that it writes to disk. But say your SSH keys, you just have them sitting on your disk unencrypted. If malware gets on there, it can grab your keys and start connecting to services that you would normally use those keys for. With the YubiKey, as soon as you lose that key, you know it's gone. You have this physical token that allows you to know if you are in control of your key. If you don't have that physical token on you, you've lost your key. So now you need to go and invalidate it and get a new one. So I think those two factors are really huge in kind of expanding why we want to use YubiKeys. And they're going to be a big part, in addition to signing policy, which is going to be, I think, really, really popular, of what we're going to do specifically in signing in the near future.
Sounds like you've got a lot of great stuff coming up. And Jared, wanted to turn to you because we heard David talk about a lot of things still to come. One of the issues he was talking about was the whole notion of transportability and mobility. And we did have someone in our chat room asking the question about YubiKey and mobile devices. Now, I see the USB use of the YubiKey. How are you working with mobile devices if you're using a YubiKey?
Great question. So obviously there's the old school way where you actually plug in a USB connector to the phone, which is not ideal. We do agree with that. And we did come up with a solution with our Generation 3 devices, which is the NFC. We will bring it to the Generation 4 devices as well. So NFC, we believe, is definitely the way to go over time. As you can see that even the folks at Apple have now introduced Apple Pay over NFC. So NFC, we believe, is a technology that will be really rampant as we go over multitude of years down the road. I think that's the right wireless protocol to be using for mobile devices. And we're also working on a Bluetooth device as well, but there are other challenges with wireless transport. So wireless and transports in general have the notion that you could be intercepted, right? So you need to have strong guarantees of the device you're connecting to or talking to is really the device that you have. And so once you deal with wireless type of technology, you have to deal with those type of attack vectors. USB it's obvious, right? Connecting it straight, it's really obvious. If you're not intending to put into the USB port, you know, unless you can obviously see a kind of some type of attachment in between to sniff that particular USB traffic, you know what's going on. NFC, you know, it's a very, very short, close range distance before you can actually activate that device. So, you know, we look at it, we don't want to really produce devices that could be attacked in other ways. And therefore, we have been very careful to select what are the wireless protocols that can communicate over mobile devices. And NFC is the right way to go. We are developing Bluetooth to solve some specific use cases. But we believe that there's going to be a variety of where the risks are for both users as well as enterprise to use YubiKeys on phones.
Very good. Well, we're coming down to the end of our time. So what I would like to do is ask each of you gentlemen if there's first one thing you want all of our listeners to keep in their minds about what you're doing with the hardware signing for Docker. And second, ask how people can keep up with what you're doing. Is there a Twitter feed? Are there blog posts? How can people keep up with you? David, I want to start with you.
So, I mean, I think things to bear in mind about Docker sort of signing and security of images in general is we're working to make it the best of the best of the best. There are a lot of signing solutions out there. A lot of them don't meet all of the requirements. We want to make it the best way of distributing software securely, knowing that you got the right thing. And in doing that, the product that we've built isn't limited to Docker images. We've integrated as Docker Content Trust in an opinionated manner, but we want all content being distributed anywhere on the internet to be more secure through this project. And then, as far as resources, I'm blanking right now.
Resources, from our perspective, any type of new capabilities that we released, we have a great newsletter that we inform our users. We have a huge following of that. We've really tried to summarize the state of the nation from our perspective, but also the state of where we are with authentication security and signing security, and in general, where we are as security as an industry. So I think a good way for the users to follow us is to subscribe to the newsletter, and obviously both our companies have great Twitter handles as well that we push out a lot of good information out.
Yeah, so on the Docker side, the Docker Twitter feed is very active, just @Docker, and we have a blog where we regularly publish both security updates and general updates about the whole Docker ecosystem.
Outstanding. Well, thanks to both of our guests for being with us today. I'd like to thank David Lawrence, Senior Engineer at Docker, and Jared Chong, Vice President of Solutions Engineering for Yubico. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening and being with us. Yes, you've spent yet another profitable hour listening to the best doggone podcast in the internet IT space. That's according to 9 out of 10 IT professionals who happen to work on a dock. Now, I couldn't do this without my co-hosts. I'd like to find out what they're going to be doing for the coming week. And Brian, we'll start with you. Brian Chi, Director of the Advanced Network Computer Lab at the University of Hawaii. What should people be looking for from you in the coming week?
Well, I am desperately trying to get our new lab space ready for Oceanography 418, which is going to be talking about embedded systems and so forth. We're going to be teaching the students how to build their own science instrumentation. Unfortunately, our classroom lab is not quite ready yet, so we're rolling up our sleeves and sanding the walls and putting up the projector. In fact, I was doing that right before the show. So look for me losing my mind trying to get ready for the fall class.
Well, I know you've got a bunch of students who are going to be very excited about that. Speaking of great excitement, Lou Maresca, Senior Engineering Manager at Microsoft. What kind of very exciting things are happening in your world in the coming week?
Well, you can always check out MicrosoftCRM.com. There's always some amazing stuff that we're doing there. We're always posting videos and different things that are coming out. And you can always check out my Twitter feed at LouMM for all the stuff that's going on this week. Thanks.
And our technical director this week has been Kara. Kara, you're over there hiding in the dark about 2,400 miles away from me. But what are you going to be doing when they allow you out from behind that desk over there?
When I get out from behind this desk, I don't know, I'll probably have a snack because I got a Technical Direct TNT, Tech News Today, our daily news show at 4 p.m., which is always a good time, though. And I also technical direct know-how on Thursdays, and I'm just an engineer, so one of the crew at TWiT. So I'll be helping out anybody who breaks anything.
Well, thanks so much for helping us out, keeping us all pointed in the right direction. As for me, my next big article at Information Week is one that looks at why becoming a great Pokemon Go coach will help you be a better Agile Scrum Master. Look for that at informationweek.com. Lots of great stuff happening in radio as well. Well, for all of us here at Twyat, we look forward to our leader, Padre, being back with us very soon. We'll look forward to you being back with us very soon as well. For all of us here at Twyat, I'm Kurt Franklin. So long, and we will see you next time here on Twyat.